All right, guys, welcome back to another New Light tutorial video, trying to help you make sense of the gigantic game that is Destiny so you don't have to feel like you're just wandering around aimlessly, because it's a huge game. It's been out a long time, and there is a ton to do. So today we are focusing in on the main map itself. So when you first load into the game, this open director, this shows you the entire world map of possible places that you can go. Now we've already shown you the tower and the helm and the enclave over at the Savathun's throne world for weapon crafting, but as you can see, there's a lot of other options up here. This is another planet, Europa, and this is another available area, the moon. Also at Savathun's throne world, aside from the enclave, there's the actual throne world itself. That's an area to do things in and explore. Down here on Earth is the EDZ and the Cosmodrome. So there's two areas you can go to do different things on Earth. Over here is Nessus, another planet. Eternity, this is the kind of destination that I was telling you related to Zur. This is not Zur where he spawns in on the weekend as the vendor for exotics, or where you can get the bounty for the exotic ciphers to spend at the exotic kiosk. This is a separate thing entirely. And then finally, in the current places we can go in-game is the Dreaming City. So all of these places and areas function the exact same as when we went into the tower and that we found our landing zone, the fast travel point, and went straight to it to drop into the world. Every other one of these functions the exact same way. So if we come over to the Dreaming City, we will see that there is one landing zone, and that is at the Devalian Mists. And if we held down A, we would get the little travel loading screen where it shows the ship in space, and then we would eventually land at this fast travel zone. The next thing that I want to point out is on the various world destinations, there are several different and changing icons with which to interact. So the first thing over here, anytime you see this sword and banner icon on any of the worlds, that is going to be an available strike in-game. The Vanguard strikes, that is part of Commander Zavala's in-game activities. You can jump straight to any specific strike in question just by hovering over and toggling A on it, and then you can launch straight into it. The next thing I want to point out is some of these icons on screen. If you see these weird little icons, these are different places in the map. The ones that are going to be typically the most useful for you to know what the icon is this. And you'll see when I hover over this one that looks kind of like a rainbow, it actually says that there is a name. These are lost sectors. Lost sectors are kind of these mini levels that you complete in the game, and at the end of completion of the boss fight, at the end of the lost sector, you're going to get loot out of a chest. A lot of these are tied to getting different weapons and different armor that you may be missing in your collection. So this is where you would do to find them. But there's also other in-game activities tied to them, especially on the master difficulty levels of the lost sectors, which we'll get into on a different map. The next thing I want to point out is this. You will see these periodically pop up on the map. Up here, this is the exact same icon as this one. It's just showing the progress bar by filling out with an orange border. Public events. These are anybody in the game world at the same time with you. These are rotating little mini in-game activities that you can complete for loot at the end of the completion. And people that are randomly in the world will pop in and help you do it. Happens all the time, and it rotates every few minutes. The next thing is specific to this world map is the Blind Well. This is one of the public event activities I was telling you about, where I was showing you there's several consumables related to it. A great place to grind or farm out for good gear and weapon drops. The next thing I want to point out is over here, and you'll see this with different icons on different destination worlds and planets, but these are going to be your vendor locations, and you'll see that it says A, add waypoint. If you hit A, it will then highlight it with a border. So when you actually load into the game on your compass, there will be a white arrow pointing you directly to this vendor so you can fast track straight to them without having to know the exact route that you have to take. So that's useful to know, especially when you're first jumping into the game. The next one up here, this is another possible strike you could play. Over in this world, there is a dungeon. There are dungeons that is challenging PVE content. You'll see it says Fire Team 1 to 3 co-op, so you can load up with a group of buddies or you could try to do it yourself. I would not recommend trying to solo as a new player because it is very challenging. It's not as challenging, most of them, as a raid, but there's only 3 players in dungeons versus 6 in raids. It's kind of like a raid light is the best way to think of it. There's different puzzles and mechanics that you have to complete, but it's not as involved or as long as a raid. So the time commitment is not as great, but you can still get awesome weapons and other loot that drops by completing these dungeons. The next one, if you see this icon in any of the world maps, it's going to be the raids. This is the top spec 6-player PvE content in the game, and this is how you get into the raids. If I wanted to go into Last Wish by myself or with my group, we would just select in, and whoever's going to load up the team, they'd jump in my lobby, and we would all go in together to try to complete the raid. Now, if you see this orange icon out to the side, you'll notice that it says Guided Game. A guided game is exactly what it sounds like. So if you go hover over and hit on the guided game little pyramid, it'll tell you to select the mode. Does that mean seeker? This means you are somebody that wants to play the raid and you want somebody to guide you through the raid. Over here is you want to perform the function of a guide for other people. So depending on what it is you're trying to do, this is where you would select which option. So if you're a veteran player and you just want to help other people get through the raid, kind of walk them through how to get through the various segments of the raid and get them through their first raid completion, you would operate as a guide. If you're playing by yourself or you only have one buddy and y'all need a team and you've never played it, you would come in as a seeker. And it will tell you that there is a minimum commitment required because getting through different encounters, typically, especially for the first time, might take about 45 minutes, but there is a weekly checkpoint. So if you don't complete all of the encounters in the raid, you can always come back throughout the week to come back, and that checkpoint will take you to the end of the last encounter that you already made it through. You'll tells you up there that chat is required for guided raiding. I would never recommend doing a raid without a microphone. I know some people do. I find that completely weird because you need to be able to communicate with your teammates in order to coordinate and do the various things that are required and mechanics in the raid. You really do need to be able to talk to one another. So I would say that a mic is a hard requirement for raiding. Then finally, it'll tell you over here to full clear the raid, multiple hours. Yeah, in general, that's right, especially if you're using the guided game because it's going to be new people. But that is some of the main things you will see on all of the different world maps. Now, we were just looking at the Dreaming City. If I scroll over to Nessus, a completely different world, but you're going to see the exact same structure. We've got our strike, sword, and banner icons. We've got our little blue diamonds with the slowly filling up public event bar meter. We've got our landing zones. You'll see on this world there's multiple different landing zones. Over here, the little green banner, that is our vendor for the world. And as we hover over the little rainbow icons on the map, those are our lost sectors yet again. So this is pretty much the same setup on all of the worlds. They're just all a little bit different. And you will notice that, of course, there is no blind well on here. That is specific to the last world we were looking at. And on this world, there's also no associated raids. Raids are not associated with each world. They are specific to the world in question. And this is going to be the exact same. No matter which one of these, it's all going to use the exact same logic. dungeons show up as dungeons. Your landing zones, fast travel points show up as landing zones. The green banner for your vendors, and your lost sectors that look like a little rainbow. So I don't need to walk through all of these individually. This is what they are and how it works. Now, Eternity, the Zur world, this one is a little bit different. So I will just at least explain what this is. There is a dungeon that you can do for Zur, the Grasp of Avarice. You have to have the DLC for that. And you can grind for specific gear drops by completing that dungeon. Up here in the middle, Dares of Eternity. This is a team-based PVE activity that you can do to go and earn different drops to spend at the Treasure Hoard, which is Zur's world here. And you can also go for gear drops. And there's a lot of really great gear that's related to Zur. And this would take you straight into his world. If you wanted to jump straight in, that will take you into it. You'll see him, and it will be very obvious. There's different chests and quests and bounties you can pick up there. So it functions just like any other world, but it is kind of its own thing on the map. Now, the very last thing I wanted to point out on this main destination section is these running 4 icons up top. If we click into the Vanguard, this is where you can get into the strike list. So say you want to do a specific strike in question, you would go to the related destination world, hover over that sword and banner icon, and just jump straight into that specific raid. It's the only raid that will ever pop up when you select it. You also have the option to jump into a rotating playlist. The most basic option is the Vanguard Ops Strike playlist. The second one is the Nightfall option. These are higher difficulty, and in fact, as you hover over, you'll notice it tells you recommended power in yellow is 1350 for the Standard Strikes playlist. As a new player, where you start as a new light, around this light level, this is where you would be starting your strike journey. The Nightfalls, they recommend power level of 1500. That is the minimum. And then finally, the Grandmaster Nightfalls, that is the top spec, hardest difficulty, a recommended power of 1620. So guys, you actually have a power cap. You will be locked out until you get near this power level before it's ever even going to let you in. This is just as hard as raiding in terms of overall enemy difficulty. So these are really reserved for the top best PVE players in the game. It's just another different activity for them to do. And there are, of course, really great things that drop by actually getting through them. One thing I do want to point out, if you go to Nightfall, it says Adept 1500, and then you hover over and it tells you the recommended power, but you can change it. If you drill into it, you'll see that there are multiple different difficulty options available on the Master Nightfall settings. So at Adept, it'll tell you matchmaking is turned on. So if you're playing solo or you don't have a full crew for the strike, it will fill out the lobby for you. And it tells you possible rewards for completing it, as well as the rarity of these possible rewards. Other thing it'll tell you is mission modifiers. These could be negative or positive depending on the specific difficulty and what is in the rotation for the week. If we scroll over to Hero, I didn't mean to click in that, sorry. Hover over Hero, we'll see it still says matchmaking is on, so it will fill out the lobby, but the power level difficulty recommended for this one goes up, and now it dumps in more possible rewards, and you'll notice as we go through, by comparison to Adept, say Enhancement Cores, it says Uncommon. At Hero level difficulty, now enhancement cores are common, but it also adds in enhancement prisms, which are rare. But that was not even available as a possible item drop on completion at the Adept difficulty. We go harder still at Legend. You notice it says matchmaking is off, so you have to have a group to do it. It's not going to throw people in to help you, but then the gear possibility for drops gets much more favorable. And then if we go to the highest tier, we'll see that matchmaking is still off. The power level requirement goes higher, but the stuff that drops becomes a lot more common. And this is the first time you'll see this. Ascendant shards. Those are possible drops on master level Nightfall completions. It's uncommon, but it's one of the ways that you can get them aside from completing your XP through the vendors at the tower. And you'll notice also as we scroll through and we look over the mission modifiers, from each difficulty level more and more will pop up and it becomes more and more challenging. And they'll tell you exactly what is required that you'll be faced against as you're playing it. So some are weapon type and modifier specific. You'll need specific mods on your weapons in order to be able to take down specific enemy types that will pop in, and that is typically related to the champions. They require different mods in order to fail them effectively. So this is where you can track all of that. And then Grandmaster is its own thing entirely. Gambit, this is where you can just jump straight into Gambit. You can host a private match if you wanted, or you can just jump straight into the activity. Now, off to the side, it has an option freelance. That means I'm a solo player. I don't have a squad, and I just want it to put me in to help fill out a squad or with other solo players. You can still play by yourself. If there's not a filled out squad, you can jump into the normal version of the game, but this is where you select to jump straight into the Gambit activity. The same is true of Crucible, but the Crucible has a lot more different activity types. So you could host a private match if you wanted. You could play Team Scorched. If you hover over, it tells you what all of these activities are. It says this is 6v6 and level advantages are disabled. Hover over Survival, it'll tell you that's 3v3. And if it says glory rank in the description, this is actually a ranked version of PvP. So it is more challenging than some of the other game modes in the PvP setting. Hover up to this one. This was freelance. So people that want to play ranked but they're by themselves could go into that queue. And just like with Gambit, you could do the same thing, but it is a separate option. Rumble, this is a free-for-all. You're not on a team. It's every man for himself. You could kind of think of it as a solo player TDM. Just whoever kills the most people does the best is the winner at the end. Elimination is another 3v3, but it'll tell us here you have to eliminate all opponents in a round-based mode. Versus, say, Survival has a different descriptor. You fight for points by depleting your opponent's shared life pool, and once their respawn pool on the round is completed, then you have to finish them off one more time, and that ends the round. So it is different depending on where you go. Control, this is 6v6, and it is kind of hot point on the map. Objective based, so 3 different objectives, and you're taking down enemies as well as trying to hold these objectives. This is the easiest place to start if you're just getting into the Crucible as a new player. That's where I would recommend going immediately to learn the ins and outs of Crucible. Would be Control. Trials of Osiris. This is the weekend pinnacle highest difficulty PvP content. You have to have purchased that passage, but this is where you go to jump into Trials. They do occasionally have different versions of Trials. They'll have a solo player queue. And the Lighthouse, this is specific to getting a perfect completion. So 7 wins in a row on your Trials passage ticket will take you to the Lighthouse, and that's where you get the chest you can open for some of the best gear in the game. It is not easy to do. It's very competitive. So, the goal one would just be getting experience playing Trials. Lastly, we have Crucible Labs. This has rotating different game modes that they're working on and testing. So if you wanted to see some of the new stuff that they have in the PvP Crucible space, that's where you would go to load in. And then this final option is Legends. This is basically legacy things that have dropped and been out for a while. You'll see there is one dungeon option in here, Prophecy, and there are two raids that are in here. Vault of Glass, this they brought back a year or so ago as a returning raid from Destiny 1. This is what I personally think is the most accessible raid for anybody. So if you wanted to try out your raid chops, this is where I would start. And you'll notice if it's your first time playthrough, they do still have that guided game option. Over here is King's Fall. This is another returning raid from Destiny 1, but this is new in Destiny 2. It's only been out for a couple of months now, I think. And again, it has the guided game option. So that's what's up here in the Legends tab. And this is all of the most important things on your destination map in Destiny. Up here just gives you some quick and dirty detail for what DLC you've purchased, and it also tells you the current status on the current season and how many days are left on it. And then down here, if you want to watch the game credits, if you're so inclined, you could click there and watch them. So guys, yeah, again, I know it's a lot to take in, but you'll start to see that there's a lot of common themes and threads and a lot of logic and method to the madness, so to speak. So just poke around, and if you ever feel like, oh gosh, I can't find what I'm looking for, I'm in the wrong place, just back out and use your bumpers to scroll through the other options that will take you through the various possible places that you could drill into until you find what you're looking for. And of course, you can always come back and rewatch the tutorial and figure it out again from there. It does get simpler from time in the saddle, so don't fret. Just take your time with it. It will become second nature after you play the game for a while. Guys, I hope you found this tutorial useful. We will see you on the next one.